Open questions and answers now. So I will ask first Tom and then Anita to summarize their own sessions. And then I'll go and summarize in very, very brief Ermias and Stefan. And right after that, we open to general questions.
Okay, thanks, Pablo. Just a very quick summary of Professor Ian Gordon's talk. Ian gave us an overview of some of the, or most of the species, large herbivores and predators that have been lost from the current wild landscapes, and basically talked about in depth this concept, ecological concept of rewilding or wilding, and the four different types that have occurred, and how we can use semi-domesticated or domesticated animals as a substitute or surrogate for the ecological process of herbivory in whichever form, magnitude or scale. Ian touched on some examples out of Europe, a rewilding in Europe initiative in Portugal, Norway, as well as the Netherlands, and some history or concepts and practice going on there. Finishing off, Ian talked about a pragmatic form of rewilding, as he called it, rewilding light, and the opportunities that it offers for both people and restoring ecological contexts. Now, I see just before we were cut off that both Suzanne Vetter and Lynn Huntsinger had their hand up in our session. So perhaps we take this opportunity, Pablo, or shall we let Anita do her summary first?
Yeah, let's do Anita do her summary first.
Sure.
Okay, so I'll remember to actually unmute it this time. So we were listening to Dr. Ritori Chakraborty about his development of the PLF framework, which is the plural knowledges framework. Sorry, I could listen to Ritori talk all day. Such a fantastic speaker. So it was a bit of a shame that he got cut off a little bit. But yeah, pretty much he ran us through what his framework is designed to do, and it kind of considers four different things: multiple world view, being relational, constituent, or Matarangi Maori in the context of New Zealand, I guess. It also considers process categories, so empirical, analytical, or representational. Evaluates assessment pathways, so narratives of sustainability, and also scales and temporalities, which unfortunately I didn't quite get to fully understand what that involved, because he was cut off a little bit. With all of this, the idea is to sort of provide an enriched picture and to kind of bring in sort of knowledge and scale and governance all together. So I think that pretty much sums up where we got to, but perhaps we could hear a little bit more from Ritori later on. Okay, well, now is my turn. We hear Professor Ermias Kibriab and Dr. Stefan Van Vliet in the stream 1 of session 2. Professor Ermias Kibriab talk about the challenges we are facing as climate is changing from a pastoralist and from pastoral production. He talked about how species could change, and he also talked about the impact of the species changing, but also how other species of plant can help in alleviate, for example, some of those changes, for example, in digestibility of forages as well. Ermias also talked about different technologies, about animal selection and breeding, and how to use those technologies to cope with climate change. Last but not least, Ermias showed fantastic results in the use of seaweed and the reduction of
methane emissions from livestock. So that's in a nutshell what Ermias talked about. I know Ermias has been done a fantastic job, and he's got several other words that I would suggest to go and review. Stefan had talked about pretty much the connection of soil, plants, and animals through metabolites, and so I see a question from Via and Chao about what is the next step. So Stefan, I would like you to answer that question, and in that way we can pass to the rest of the audience to ask questions to the speakers.
Great, thank you, Pablo. I had it as the last slide. So the next steps are overlaying all these metabolomes. So we are collecting stool samples. Well, let me start at the beginning for that. So we're collecting soil samples in this work from more conventional fields and biodiverse pasture. Then we're collecting plant samples, total mixed ration, pasture samples, as you can see here. We also image the using UAVs to image pasture health. We can look at vegetation quality and chlorophyll content in that way. And then finally, we collect meat samples, both grain fed and grass fed, collecting stool samples, look at the relationship between the consumption of meat from different animal systems, look at markers of antibiotic resistance genes, as well as alpha and beta diversity to connect all the dots together. And then finally, we use metabolomics to overlay the soil metabolome, the forage metabolome, the grass-fed beef metabolome, the human metabolome to look at nutrients and potential transfer along this continuum.
That's a very good answer, Stefan. I'm aware that we are running out of time, so I would like to give opportunity to others,
sure.
Others to ask questions. So that's a fantastic job. And I said again, Stefan, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be working with you, and thank you to Silver Ferns, the farms that is sponsoring our work. Susan, go ahead. Susan Better, you got a question?
Hi, yes, thank you. It's a question for Ian. I've been following the rewilding literature with some interest. And one thing that strikes me is that it's really strongly concerned with Europe and North America. And there seems to be very little engagement with Southern Africa, for example. Here in South Africa, we've had massive land use change from livestock farming to wildlife farming, which is essentially a form of rewilding. And it's had interesting ecological consequences. And I would have thought that those sorts of examples would be of real interest to the rewilding debate. But I see very little mention of this in the rewilding literature. I was just wondering if you'd comment on that.
Yeah, good point, Suzanne. And very good to meet you again. It's a while. So I agree, and I see the same in Australia. So rewilding is almost not talked about at all in the Australian context. I think Africa is an interesting example because one could say that humans have been on the African continent for millions of years, and obviously the pro-humans have been there for millions and millions of years. And so humans have been part of the African landscape for a long time. And one sees, in effect, with the Western world's view about conservation, this idea about fortress conservation. So you move people out of areas where you want to conserve the wildlife in the pristine, in inverted commas, state. So we see that in the Serengeti, for example. And humans have had a long and interesting interaction and shaping of the landscape, and also obviously their domestic stock. So I think that Africa is ripe for a conversation around rewilding and the idea about what rewilding would look like, and take it away from the Western view of rewilding max, which is about humans not being part of the landscape, into one where I'm advocating, which is rewilding life, where humans and their domestic stock are part of those landscapes. But you're also achieving a range of other objectives through the ecosystem services that the rewilded landscapes can provide.
Yep, thank you very much, Ian. That's a fantastic answer. It's great. So now I got a question from Irene to Ritodi. Irene, you can either voice it out or I can read it for you. I'll read it to make it faster, just in case. The question to Ritodi is, Ritodi, can you, in a nutshell, telling us more what you are doing regarding Mataranga Maori in the Center of Excellence?
Thanks for that question, Irene. And just to start with this, I am not Tangata Whenua, I'm not Maori personally. And so a lot of what I do, a lot of what I've learned is because I have, asked for the right permissions to the right people and, engaged in a way that actually makes sense. I'll just talk about one big thing. I mean, there's so much we are doing with Mataranga Maori, which is cultural mapping, right? One of the biggest, I would say, issues we have right now is this complete lack of analytical and representational equality, right? Because at the end of the day, if you look at a map and you're seeing these coordinate systems and you're seeing rivers and mountains and trees, you're just seeing the material, right? You're just seeing one landform, and that in itself is, because it's on a map, it emerges as being the entirety of reality. But the moment you enter a Maori cultural map, then so much more becomes sentient, right? There are tanifas, there are migration routes, there are wahitupuna that all of a sudden emerge. And so an indigenous worldview inherently ensures that the living, the non-living, the spiritual, the material are engaged in this dynamic relationship, right? And if we as land use or environmental management planners cannot create platforms that allow for this diversity, not just of human, but more than human, not just of material, but more than material artifacts and relationships to emerge, then we are failing the indigenous worldview at the onset. And so some of the work that we are doing with cultural mapping allows those things to emerge, right? It allows these landscapes to all of a sudden come to life. And then that can have huge ramifications on how we choose to design the places that we want to live in.
Thank you. But that's an excellent question and an answer, a fantastic answer. In fact, I would have ask if there is more time, what is Paulo Carvalho doing in that matter in South America? And there are other people from South America as well that would like to comment on that. But before we go to that, Rashmi, you have raised your hand, you got a question, so go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And my question is for Jan. Actually, it was quite surprising for me, whatever Jan told me, because in South Asia, we are actually going towards a thing where after like 50 or 80 years, we'll be going in the direction that Jan had just mentioned, because there have been a lot of human evictions to free the space from humans so that we go into the rewilding of it. However, I was thinking that what are the wild animals? I mean, other than the introduced livestock, what are the wild animals in the space? And if not, why are we really calling it rewilding? Because it's like rehumanizing, because we are introducing these animals. So just these thoughts about rewilding and how it's something ahead of time from South Asia, where there are policies on human evictions and removal of livestock for regional conservation. Thank you.
Thanks, Rashmi. And I know your work on the evictions that are happening in Southeast Asia of people from their grazing lands, so the traditional peoples from their grazing lands. And I think that is a regressive step. I think that we are learning from many places around the world how the eviction of local peoples from lands means you get a change in those landscapes, which is not always what one would expect. And so you get perverse outcomes, for example, as we hear about these wildfires in Europe, Australia, and in the US. So in the in the Southeast Asian context, there are still a number of the species there that would have been there in the past. So you've got the large herbivores, including some of the mega herbivores, for example, the Asian elephants. But I call it it's called rewilding because in many contexts in Europe and the US where this is really being thought about, it's about bringing back the wild, and it's the idea that the wild does not include humans, right? And in some ways, it's separating out people from nature, and it's that classic dichotomy between the human world and the natural world. And as was said, the theme of this conference is I am the land and the land is me. So it's the relationship between people and nature, which is a key fundamental part of the way in which these wild landscapes should operate. And that means that people are part and are delivering our activities in a way which ultimately is for the best outcomes for nature as well.
Thank you, Ian, for your answer. Thank you, Rashmi, for your answer. We got time for one more question. There are several questions for Ritodi that I can pass it to Ritodi later on. So if Ermias is online, I'd like to ask a question. Ermias, how do you see models of vegetation dynamics in the future to help us out to decide what sort of plant we need, or communities of plant we need to manage in the landscape as the climate is changing?
Thanks, Pablo. Yeah, so I think one of the things that's been done in several places right now is try to figure out what kind of plants and forages are promoted or would be better adapted to the different areas, because different areas can be affected in different things. In terms of precipitation, for example, there would be some areas where there's greater precipitation, others not so much. The same thing with the temperature also, although the average will increase, but there will be some differences where this increase is going to happen and where it's not. So I think this is kind of a geographically sort of specific areas and then trying to adaptation to those new realities. As we learn more and more about the impact of climate, and as we develop more models, better models to predict what is going to happen in this area, sort of in different parts of the world, then I think we'll be able to try to adapt to that condition and have those forages developed in order to be able to withstand whatever challenges we might have in the future.
Thank you very much, Ermias. And thank you very much to everybody. Hopefully you understand we are in a tight timing, if you like. We've been having a lot of questions. I've been checking my emails as well, not only the chat, but so what we are gonna do now is pretty much a little bit of event wrap up, and then talk a little bit about Young Academic Awards. I imagine there are a few of the youngsters, the young guns, waiting for to see what happened there. So in a way of wrapping up, I think we can talk about the main themes that we've been talking about today. As just starting, Ermias put a really nice paper together and a fantastic talk about what would happen with plants, what are technologies we have available as climate change to live with that, and how we can use those technologies and information we have to better cope with those eventualities that happen from a climate change point of view. We have Stefan in the same stream that is talking about how we can connect soil, plant, animals, and humans through a metabolomic approach. And again, going creating health from the ground up. We have a lot of interest about the talk that Ian provided today about rewilding or rewilding light, and those are the things that are coming up and up and up, including our wonderful Aotearoa, New Zealand. Ritodi, I hear and see about your comments. You got a massive amount of questions about the framework we use in the center and how we use that framework and how you incorporate Mataranga Maori in this sort of design. Paulo, also a fantastic talk there on how to integrate grazing in a more really integrated production systems and the advantage of thinking of different grazing strategies and methods to cope with some of the negativities, if you like, on grazing animals on soils. I'm trying to summarize everything we've been talking about that today. Susan and Lynn, you have provided a wonderful talks as well. Susan, I know that several professors here that are dealing with indigenous knowledge as well wanted to contact you, especially because of the latest articles you put together. It's a very interesting approach that you are taking. Lynn, about fires, about California, I think if you watch the news, we know what's going on. And so you have provided a fantastic talk there as well. And hopefully we can use some of the things that you have talked about there. So I know I'm not summarizing perfectly all of your efforts, all of your talks, and I really thank you for being patient with us and put that massive amount of effort in 15 or 20 minutes. So what we are gonna do now is just move to the next step about the Young Academic Awards. So we have multiple applications for this Young Academic Award. In this particular case, I'm showing you the finalists. That we got Cameron Marshall as a finalist, Rashmi Singh as a finalist, James Eager as a finalist, and Connor Garrett as a finalist. The Young Academic Awards are provided by the Rural Co, by the Elite Agricultural Trust. So without further ado, I am going to play a video of one of the sponsors now, and then we are going to announce the awardees.
Farming is in your blood, and it's in ours too. We've been obsessed with agriculture since we opened our doors in 1963. Since then, we've been helping Kiwi farmers get access to everything they need when they need it. Through our co-op, we negotiate with our supplier network for real value on everyday items. We make it easy and convenient with one card to use online or in store and one monthly statement. Our obsession is agriculture, supporting Kiwi farmers like you today and helping you build a sustainable farming business for tomorrow. Enjoy the convenience of shopping online.
So, congratulations, Kona. Kona is one of the awardees of this award. Kona is a PhD candidate in animal science. She's working in nutritional foraging ecology and pretty much on the effect of dietary monotony, diversity, and variety in animal production, animal welfare. And so thank you very much, Kona. Thank you for applying to this Young Academic Award, and kudos on you. So you know, each of the awardees will have 5,000 New Zealand dollars to keep them working and to establish network with all of the speakers or the pertinent speakers they would like to, and use those dollars to do some more research. So congratulations, Kona. The second awardee is a different sort of beast, if you like. It's James Eagers. James is working in his master's in landscape architecture, and James is working pretty much in landscapes and methodologies to improve water retention in dryland farming in New Zealand. So congratulations to you, James. And last but not least, we got another PhD candidate from the School of Human Ecology in Delhi. Rashmi Singh. Yeah, Rashmi is exploring politics, rangeland conservation, and pastoralist in India. So kudos on you, and we're looking forward to hear from your talk in the day 4 of our events, Rashmi. So to all those that haven't gotten the award, you were fantastic as well. It was a really hard decision from us, from Carol, from Ian, from Fred, and I. So next time. So, and the ones that you got the award, again, congratulations. Thank you very much. We got a bit more. We got a bit more time. I'm being told by Julia. This is the first time we do this. It was a lot of effort, a lot of, I wouldn't say stress, right? This is not stressful. This is something that we are all working together and learning together. So what we are going to do now is just play the videos that we couldn't play, and we'll leave it like that. And as we are playing, I would like to invite you to the next workshop, which is the next Monday New Zealand time, next Sunday wherever you are. So thank you very much to all of you, and enjoy the videos.
Ko au te whenua, ko te whenua, ko au. We are members of nature's communities. What we do to them, we do to ourselves. Only by nurturing them can we nurture ourselves. Support.
A place of balanced biodiversity, of finite resources. But our population continues to grow, to expand, to consume. The pressure on our home is evident. We have an opportunity, though, to reimagine our world, our home, to create a place of balance, of productive ecosystems, a place where mankind, flora, and fauna flourish. We have an opportunity to reimagine our scapes, our thought and social scapes, our landscapes, rural, urban, and wild, our food and healthscapes. This is a call to you, the thinkers, the dreamers, the doers. Join us here at New Zealand's Lincoln University at the Centre of Excellence for Future Productive Landscapes. Join academics and thought leaders from around the world. Help conceive, shape, and design a future of sustainable, productive landscapes. Together we can build a future of ecological, economic, and social health, as well as cultural wealth.
Come and make a difference. Join us at our Center of Excellence. We are designing future productive landscapes at Lincoln University.